Okay, welcome everyone. This is Module 7. We are here into week 7 of the course with a very interesting discussion this week. It's about public databases and datasets. Databases and datasets certainly are very valuable ways to represent and store data. As bioinformaticians, we need to have data to supply our results, analysis, annotations, conclusions, and so on and so forth, visualizations, and many of the things that we do as bioinformaticians require having access to databases and data sets. So we're going to dive into this week. In terms of, again, level that we build of expertise for ourselves as bioinformaticians seeking to build experience or learn more about bioinformatics. This is one of the core topics. There's no question. Moving in this course from molecular biology to biotechnology and technologies, looking into concepts like alignment, and start working with some files and samples and see what is, what are these RNA-seq files, how we can do some alignment, and what are these alignment softwares, what are the principles behind. Now, I think it is a good step to start moving to a database and dataset concepts. Why? Because imagine now you are sitting in your lab and you are taking this part where you have built a pipeline. Okay, let's for the moment say that you have the sufficient expertise to reflect on the last two modules and build a pipeline for processing FASTQ files for gene expression analysis that you will get from maybe several experiments related to the lab you are in, the industry, the government, whatever. Now, once you have this data, raw data, it is in the raw shapes. You have FASTQ files, and once you process those, you don't want to keep, going back to the raw files. So you extract some data and information. Storing that might be useful. Annotating that might be very helpful. So you will end up creating some data sets. You'll end up using some databases, and we are here into this stage in the course. So we'll go over some different types of databases. So I would say be relaxed in this lecture. I don't see there, ideas that would relate to theory, deep ideas into, you remember the in-depth of molecular biology, sometimes that we covered seemed coming with lots of terms and so on and so forth, or technology aspects or algorithm size that we had last week, like suffix trie and dictionaries and so on and so forth. This is more of, viewing a set of databases that are very valuable to any bioinformatician. So as I go through this, I want to give you to give me your input into what do you think, or if you ever came through a database in bioinformatics, what do you think is a very important database? Okay, so this is my first treasure hunt question for this module. Okay, here you go. And again, have you ever worked with any database for any bioinformatics work? Yes or no? If yes, again, tell me what was that database. Share it or set of databases, okay? If not, just say, no, I've not worked with any database so far. I'm going to learn about your experience with databases, and maybe you would bring my attention to some interesting database, okay? So in this lecture, we want to help you to understand the different types of databases that are there, highlight some big initiatives. We'll talk about the National Center for Biotechnology Information, NCBI, and we'll talk about European Biotechnology Information Center, EBI, and so on and so forth. So these are big government initiatives or centers that were built to lead data in bioinformatics and biotechnology field. Of course, they are behind of many valuable resources and tools. So we'll be covering a few concepts related or databases related to genes, proteins, sequences, drugs, chemical molecules, and maybe even looking into some interesting tools related to these databases. So again, why would we care about looking and understanding what is a database? As I said earlier, database is going to be our resource, our valuable resource to access knowledge that has been accumulated throughout the years by different scientists, and then try to take advantage of this structured data. Generally, when you go to databases, you're able to query, which means ask a question about a specific concept, and then you get access to reports or details about that specific concept. That is very powerful and useful for us. And it is such an appreciated effort to say that downstream analysis cannot be done without knowing what this sequence ID representing, which gene basically. So the downstream analysis starts by trying to map and figure out what are those transcript IDs. So tell me, which technology are you using? Are you using, Affymetrix? Are you using Illumina? Tell me which versions, which species are you talking about? And then we try to recognize which reference IDs. And from there, we start mapping to the library. And from there, we start mapping to specific features or gene IDs. Why do we need to do these steps? Because if by the end of the day I tell you, you know what, this is sequence whatever, X, Y, Z, 1, whatever, alpha, beta, and then Z, 0, 1. What is this? Okay. Compare this to telling you, you know what? This is NPC1 gene. This is Niemann-Pick type C gene. Okay, now I know what you're talking about, so I can move on with more further interpretations. So databases are there to help us with many of these tasks. So we'll be highlighting that every bioinformatician should know something about databases. Basically, if you are an expert bioinformatician, you are a person who knows how to use lots of databases, and you're an expert with that. Not only this, a bioinformatician who knows their domain and working with domain experts like physicians, biotechnologists, and so on, chemists and biologists, and so on and so forth, can be the person who lead them into, given their experience with database and how it's used, interface, and so on and so forth, can help those research partners to build their own database. So whatever we go through today can also be helpful to think about building your own database. Why not? It is another database with some easily accessible information concerning your own setup, your own queries, your own challenges, and it could be your next publication. Databases are very valuable resources to contribute to as well. Okay. So by now, as a quick check-in, I hope things are going well with you in the course. Please share with me your feedback. I'm still hoping you are watching lecture. A few students, I would say maybe a good number of the students are still active in the treasure hunt activity. This is like the activity that tells me that you are watching the lectures. It makes me happy because, I know that you are organizing your time. This is the first thing I get, I don't claim this would be the best, lecture for whatever material. I'm doing my best. You are doing your best. But this is a time for us to coordinate together and then help each other. I'm trying to help you, and you're trying to help me as well by watching this lecture and trying to understand very important concepts. At least, review some of these terms or ideas. So what I'm trying to say here is I hope you are watching the lectures, and if you are already doing so, uh, that is very appreciated. And like I have a list of names now. It's reasonable number. Maybe one third, almost one half of the class are watching the lectures and sharing their answer for the treasure hunt questions. Okay, so I hope you are doing well. Give me your feedback if you have anything, any complaints. You think we already almost passed half the course. Okay, this is module 7. I guess roughly there are 5 more modules. There is 1 week for a break and so on and so forth. You have your projects at the end and so on and so forth. So please, if you have any feedback you want to share, something you like, something you don't like, something you want to change, something you want to learn more about, please share it with me. So databases, and our focus is on biological databases. Otherwise, there are databases everywhere, right? On your phones, cell phones, your computer, your HR department have their own database. Wherever system, government systems, you go to the health department, you see, or to vehicle services, registration services, and so on. So of course, they have their own databases, but our focus is on the biological database. These are really, truly unique databases. Why? Because when you look into the spectrum of databases around, like you can tell, they share some commonalities in terms of saying, you know what, if I go to the government service here, which is the health sector, they're going to take records of information about patients who are people. So basically, you're going to take the name, date of birth, ID, and so on and so forth. I go to health Datasets department. I go to the vehicle registration. Maybe I go to the court. Maybe I go to other departments. And every time there is some commonality in terms of some information they collect. And of course, they have the unique part. This might be the case in biological databases, but I would say that my personal feeling, they are more diverse in terms of the information they're looking into. This is a reflection of the complexity that we're dealing with. So different species, different information, different initiatives to collect the same information about the specific biological concept of interest. For example, I cannot refer you to a single database for genes and knowing genes. Or in other words, we're going to come to the stage where you see, oh, it is a little bit confusing. For that specific gene, we have one ID, another ID, and a third ID. Why do you have several IDs for the same gene? And these IDs, they look totally the different thing because they were sometimes different initiatives. One initiative documented this gene and used a specific standard for the ID system, and another one used a different ID system. Sort of, you are dual nationality, you end up with 2 passports, so you have 2 national IDs. Yes, sort of these ideas. So regardless of this, how biological databases may resemble or not, and how they share with in general, the overall databases that we face in life, they here sharing the technology part in terms of the computer science perspective. We have databases. These are certainly software aspect of how we can store our data and manage it very well. So there are enzyme databases, disease databases, chemical databases, microarray databases, taxonomic, metabolic, model organism, and so on and so forth. Lots and lots and lots of databases that are out there. And depending on your own problem or area of interest, you might be dragged to go and query more about specific databases. There are thousands of biological databases. This is an interesting figure to show some stats about for example, top countries in terms of, and institutions in terms of database count, okay? Database count. So you'll find that this is, I guess this is from paper, yeah, it's here. Okay, it's this statistics were released in 2021 or 2022. So you find the United States is then top, and then China. There's no question, we know it in the field, there is research competition. There are efforts in different countries, especially when it comes to the area of bioinformatics. Now, personally, I look at it from a fruitful aspect. Resources being released for us as bioinformaticians, we want to take advantage of it. And sometimes it really highlights different aspects. Okay, maybe in one country see more interest in plant biology, for example, as compared to other one, because their view of what is a medicine is not only, you know, coming up with chemical molecules. Maybe you can derive this more from already products that we have in nature. So anyway, for me, those are all interesting resources. But of course, some countries are taking initiatives and taking things as serious. First of all, to document whatever data they have locally or nationally, and also to release to the world some interesting tools and show that they have been contributing to the field. So now looking at the top centers here, we'll have EBI, okay, European Bioinformatics Institute, okay. Pardon me, earlier I said, I think I said European Biotechnology Institute, so it is EBI. So we're going to talk a little bit about this and NCBI, but those are big institutes, okay? And you see, ABI has contributed so far 95 databases, and every single database is a huge resource, okay? So lots of stats. There are also ranks in terms of citations between countries and so on, institutes and so on and so forth. You will see NCBI is coming here third in this case in terms of database, number of databases, and then you can, if you are interested to learn more, like, you know, how interesting this to the world in terms of, again, the databases, so it's ranked second. So it means the database coming from NCBI are valuable, okay? So thousands of databases, almost 6,000, almost 9,000 publications talking about these databases. Sometimes there is a release version one of the database, and then after a few years, version 2, maybe next year, and so on and so forth. Sometimes you'll find 10 or 15 papers talking about the same database. Many countries are on that list, and so on and so forth. So what is a biological database in terms of, you know, a definition? So I want to share some insights with you. You know, by the end of the day, we are having some storage space. So let me, you know, try to sketch something here. Okay. So imagine that I have somewhere a server. Okay. So this is where I need to store my data. We usually give this in terms of symbol, that is an illustration of what is database. We usually use this shape here to indicate that there is a storage of data. Okay, think of some barrel or so, okay, where we pour some information or data here. So a server or database, when we refer to this as concept of database, what's happening is we get data. Most of the cases, guys, it is unstructured data, okay? Like think of, for example, about text documents. And so we end up doing something with this structured data. We're trying to have a standard representation for this, for easy access. In other words, we're trying to come up with some tables of information. Usually these tables are designed to have some key, which means it's an idea of that concept, and then some details, okay? Some details. So this table is going to hold information. Someone, an expert, needs to design this by looking into this unstructured data, perhaps keeping it unstructured, but in the shape of some key and details. Now, if this would look similar to you as two columns where you use key to index or access something, my second treasure hunt question is, where did we see this before? Where did we see this before? Okay. I'm going to give you a moment, and I'm not going to give you the answer. I'm hoping that you are able to trigger this out and then link this perfectly to where we discussed such concept. Although it was not, well, it was for storage, data storage, but not database. So anyway, we can either keep data as unstructured, meaning as simple as it could be. Just give me a key. At least all I want to know is what is the folder ID to access all information. Give me a gene ID. Okay, come up with the gene ID and then put everything we know about that gene here. Well, compare this to a different design. Compare this to the different design that's going to come and say, yo, you know what? I don't like this. You tell me just details, and this would force me always to read all of that information about that gene. Why not to break it down? Okay, and then say I have several tables. Okay, several tables. For example, tell me something about a table which is gene disease information, gene gene ontologies, okay, and then maybe you have your own data of differentially expressed genes, DEGs, okay. So now, and again, for those who are expert in the database, they may say, well, you still use some databases or that we cannot easily link to each other and they are still unstructured. Fine. Just to give some illustration, bear with me. The idea is maybe the disease is here. Maybe I shift this to be disease ontologies, okay? And maybe I have, instead of DEGs, species. So let me update this, okay? So what's happening? The gene is linked to some disease. And if I need more information about the disease, I'm going to query the disease here and get more details about the concepts related to that disease. At the same time, I can access the species database and know what are specifics of that species for this given disease. So regardless of the example and how good it is, the idea is we can build layers of information that we can query and link together, as compared to just everything is dropped in that sense or that way. And again, in general, we refer to these as, it's going to be really difficult to give an example where we distinguish two paradigms nowadays in database, but this is what we refer to as NoSQL or NoSQL, and this is SQL, okay? A perfect example for SQL structured query language tables or databases where you have softwares built to handle that, such as MySQL, okay? MySQL, I guess, yeah. And there are other technologies related to querying SQL language or storing databases. Standard structured query language itself is a language. It is very natural kind of style of language. So you would say select that information from that table where ID would equal that, and so on and so forth. You would use such conditions. And then NoSQL is where it's very common nowadays to hear about MongoDB, okay, Mongo databases. And this is mostly structured as key and details. You could have multiple tables as in this example, okay? But working on structuring this into relationships, strict relationships, where we maintain what's called one-to-many relationships, for example, one-to-many relationships, or one-to-one, or many-to-many, and so on and so forth. This is part of the SQL paradigm. So some of these terms might be new for you, but what I want to highlight here is there's a technology aspect. There are systems built to host data, and so there are paradigms in this field. In fact, database is a very active area of research in computer science. And once we decide on what technology we want to use and how we want to build this, and if you're interested to learn more about this or have more discussions, please come to the office hour, and I'm going to be very happy to discuss any concepts. I have lots of experience with databases with many technologies and so on and so forth. Now it was on top of my head. So this is Postgres. This is another kind of query language or system that we can use. So anyway, we have then a database. We have some data. Okay, let me put it differently. We have some data, whether it's going to make it, whether we're going to structure that into some tables or leave them unstructured in shape of dictionaries, whether this or that. We're going to end up using what's called a database management system. So this is a software layer that's going to give us accessibility to store this data, ask questions about this data, and so on and so forth. And finally, this would be on some resource. Okay, this could be the cloud. Okay, this could be the cloud. This could be the data center, and so on and so forth. And back and forth, there is a communication, okay, that keeps going. So this is what a database is. What makes a biological database unique is that we have biological terms, okay, biological terms. So biological database is a collection of data that is structured. As I said, it could be unstructured, flexible, searchable. I can search, I can update it, write down information, and so on and so forth. And usually the data that is stored is maintained. Sometimes there is an expert effort into the process where human and manual curation increases the quality of that database as compared to running some probabilistic models and algorithms to find some information with a range of error that could be high or or low. And data is certainly organized in some specific way. So in terms of classification of databases by data type, we have protein sequences, we have genome databases, DNA variations, disease-related information, and so on and so forth, drug-related information. So this is one way to classify databases, is to look into the type of the data that is being stored, okay? The type of data that is being stored in this database. There is an issue here with this slide, so bear with me. Oops, yes, it's causing some, yeah. Okay, so here we are back, just so that you don't miss the view of the full slide. And here you go. Cool. Okay. Okay, nucleotide sequences, protein sequences, genome databases, those are groups of databases depending on the type of information they are holding. If I'm looking at drugs, for example, then we have drug databases. Looking at genes, okay, we have nucleotide sequences databases. Looking at genomes and reference genomes, I have to jump into genome databases, and so on and so forth. Another way that we can look into databases in terms of classification is through considering classification by data source. Where is the data coming from? Okay, so the primary source, or what we call primary databases in this case, refers to experimental results directly imported to the database. That is as compared to results of analysis that is coming from the primary database. We call it secondary database. So primary databases are those ones that reflect on the experimental side. Think, for example, about having a high throughput screening assay. So it is this experiment where we are going to screen the biological outcome of screening maybe hundreds or thousands of chemicals on a specific biological target, for example, specific protein, and then run this in silico screening or or in vitro screening, and then store this information in a specific database. So we can refer to this as primary database. And again, results of that analysis that we further analyze can be stored in a secondary level of databases. So where are you getting your information from? Would define that or data source would define these different layers. There is a composite database, which is itself aggregated of different databases, combination of data, consolidation of data, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, before I move on, I want to highlight something in terms of sources databases. There are databases that, personally, when I come to look into databases and extract an information, I start asking, is this database giving me results that were curated manually? Because for me, this is always gets me closer to what I would call a golden standard, something validated, by experts, as compared to what? As compared to running some algorithm blindly means there's no human interference that's gonna scan hundreds of papers and tell us, this drug is related to that protein or gene and give you a score. And this is still a nice way because it's organized the data that we can access, okay, and look into and study and understand. But maybe it's not as valid as the human or the manually created database. So experimental data is always very valuable. And, I think it's time now. Now, one can come and jump here and say, Prof, I disagree. Okay, we have AI now. Okay, we have ChatGPT. So here's one thing I want you to try. Okay, and if you want to share with me as a third bonus, whatever treasure hunt question is fine. Go and ask ChatGPT a question that it cannot answer, and you would tell me, well, what do you mean? Like any question I ask to ChatGPT is going to answer. Well, okay. There are some questions that ChatGPT cannot answer. Okay, especially when we work with this field of bioinformatics and biology. Why? Before I give you some example, I'm going to leave it to you if you can find some example out of interest. Why? Because if there's no documented data about that, how come ChatGPT is going to give you a generative text about that? In other words, if we're trying to find a relationship between a specific drug, okay, and a specific nutrition, to know more about the side effects. So if you want to try an example, think about a nutrition now and some drug, okay? Grapefruits, very common example. And let's say, I don't know, paracetamol, okay? Whatever, painkiller. This is a very easy, simple example. I don't know if you start asking ChatGPT, but this can get easily into very sophisticated cases. And ChatGPT can give you some information about if it knows if there's some data resource that was built there. If not, how come it's going to generate some text? So why I raise or open this discussion to tell you that AI and myself, I would consider myself as, an AI expert. Okay, I teach AI, I understand AI, I use it, of course, I keep up with it, but there is a limitation. We need data to build AI. That's going to take me back to the experimental data aspect. It is time that we call for more experimental data coming out in the field of bioinformatics. Yes, we have lots of databases, but as you start asking some specific questions, you would realize that we lack so much data to validate or invalidate certain hypotheses. And it could be the case in many of the times that we are going to stop and then wait until further findings to come. Okay? And sometimes it's not easy to make this call, but now we know that technology is becoming more accessible, and hopefully with these initiatives like sequencing the Million Human Genome Project and so on and so forth. So databases are going to be very helpful for us, very useful. It's going to be very interesting to see an integration of conversational AI with databases. So maybe in the coming, it could be some interesting, idea for a publication, if you are interested, to go and try to combine both. Okay, so download OpenAI library in terms of a Python code, for example, take the models, try to adapt them into certain databases and integrate. And here you go, maybe a couple of databases, and you start using conversational AI to query these databases or build interpretations linked to PubMed and so on and so forth, or other resources, meaning articles and more information. So anyway, the point of this whole discussion is to tell you databases, data, AI, whatever, nothing like doing an experiment by the end of the day. We all realize it, okay? The reason for that is we struggled as humanity with vaccination for COVID-19. And still we are not yet pretty sure of some side effects and which one was more efficient or not, and so on and so forth. So we used most recent technologies, and yet experimental part was not keeping up with how we progressed with the, Moore's law kind of advancement in computational resources. Our management of research projects did not keep up with that. So no more deviation, but database is into the management aspect. So maybe you highlighted a couple of ideas. Classification by data availability. Sometimes the data is publicly available. Sometimes it is copyrighted. Sometimes it's accessible, not downloadable. Sometimes you can access it, okay, but you need some subscription. One good example for this is going to be GenBank that we'll see today. What an interesting story. Everything was open until it turned out to be very, very successful until they decided to commercialize it. So yes, you can make money from databases. Could be proprietary. It could be that the database is there, but you need to run some training course because of the privacy issues. They make sure that you're not going to release that information. So it's publicly available with some restrictions. So let's move with the first and start looking at the first group of databases, specifically here what are called sequence databases.